first I'll introduce Santosh. If anybody follows me or us on LinkedIn, I talk about Santosh a lot. Santosh writes a lot. If you're seeing my stuff, you're probably seeing his posts because we work at the same company. Um, if you have not had a chance to look over Santosh's LinkedIn, uh, you really should. Santosh, I'll just drop it in the chat real quick. This man has has accomplished a tremendous amount in his career. He's going to talk a lot about it today. And he's the thing that I think is so cool about Santosh is he was a part of some of the biggest companies of our time when they were like startups like you and me and all of us. So he has seen how the magic happens. He's seen kind of the fundamental building blocks that have led to this ongoing explosive growth that a lot of these companies have had. And he's actually working with a ton of companies that haven't seen it, which is maybe the most interesting part of this whole thing. So I'm going to turn it over to Santosh, and he's going to talk to us about the experience he's had and observations about exponential growth, what it is, what the ingredients are. And one last thing before I hand it over. So we thought that, I imagine that the attendees will keep going up as we go in the first sort of 10 minutes here. We're going to try to do questions in the chat, and I'm going to pick out the best questions and tell the person to speak. So that's going to be our attempt this week. I'll let you know if that changes, but as he's presenting, just write questions in the chat, and then I will aggregate answers, or I will aggregate questions and then invite people to ask them, because we're going to have you ask with your voice, not mine. Okay, Santosh, let's go.
Thank you, Adam. Let's dive in. So like Adam said, I've been fortunate to have witnessed multiple high growth companies. And my assessment is that building a unicorn or building a immensely high growth company is not as difficult as it's made out to be. In fact, growth is the most natural thing, right? In the nature or in our economy. Our economy continues to grow. Individual aspirations continue to grow. And yet, if you look at, most of the startups don't grow. In fact, they don't even survive, right? And then a handful grow disproportionately. So let's talk about, what are the common traits in some of these rapid growing companies, and what can we do to emulate some of this growth. Here we go. So before I talk about the best practices that I picked up along the way, I'll take you to the summer of 2012, around the time I joined ZoomInfo. ZoomInfo had been in business for about 12 years and doing maybe 10 million or even below in revenue. And it didn't look a very happy place. It didn't look very attractive as a company. This was also the summer when LinkedIn had gone IPO. And I made some investments, and I was reading their prospectus, and I got fascinated by data businesses and data economy in general. So one thing led to another, and I joined ZoomInfo as VP of Product, later Growth and Strategies. And the next 4 years were some of my most formative years at ZoomInfo. Learned a ton and witnessed some spectacular growth where we almost doubled revenue every year. I stayed at ZoomInfo for a total of 5.5 years, some as advisor post my tenure. But here's something very interesting. After my job at ZoomInfo, I thought, great, I've seen how data companies can be scaled from like single digit to close to 100 million in ARR. Now I can go around and share these best practices to many other companies. So I advised or worked with over 20 data companies in the next 10 years. And I shared the best practices I saw at ZoomInfo on how they sold, how they built data, how they built teams. Crickets, like I was dumbfounded because it worked with a handful, but it didn't work with 90% of the companies I shared this information with. And it was extremely puzzling for me, especially because if you have been in the data space, you realize that data companies are very similar to each other, right? They're selling to the exact same buyers. They're even buying data from the exact same vendors, and then they're building the same products, right? It's just a data browser, a search engine. So the only variable was they had a different team with different ambition, with different capitalization, all the non kind of data related stuff. And the lessons I learned on why some companies succeed while others don't are primarily isolated around these variables. So in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to share these 9 kind of lessons. So just quickly going through it. What I've learned is sharing best practices don't help because every company is in a different journey, has a different org DNA, but more importantly, these best practices, the more they're used, the less efficient they become. So you got to innovate rather than copy from your market leader. You'd be surprised how many founders don't play to win. This is something I learned along the way. They are playing not to lose. A lot of the founders are not thinking about and highlighting your competitors. We live in a winner-take-all model. So unless you dominate, you don't survive. So we'll talk about that and the role it plays into building high-growth companies. We'll talk about S-curves. And then we live in a new world where you don't have a sustainable moat. No business has a moat that you can keep charging premium for long term. Instead, you have micro moats. We'll talk about that. And then if you want to compete, there's always, with your largest competitor, there's always an opportunity at the lower end. And we'll see how that played out in my experience. And then the last 3, hype and attention is really important to discount your future marketing. You need to build a business that like tomorrow looks better than today and day after always looks better than tomorrow, right? And how flywheels help. And then lastly, the team that you build is really the key to unlocking this potential. All right, first takeaway, like I mentioned, the best practices, I mean, this is a common urge when founders, if they are early in their journey, what they want to do is copy from the market leaders, right? And they try to find employees that have worked in one of these market leaders, and they try to replicate what has been done. That's a recipe for disaster for a variety of reasons. But let me take you back to 2012 or 2013, and I'll show you with specific examples why that doesn't work. So back to ZoomInfo, this was 2012 or 13. We were getting about 200, 300 inbound leads a month. And then we published all of our contact and company data to a search engine using programmatic SEO. So we generated more pages than Time Warner or CNN has on search engine, like 50 million, 100 million of these profile pages, right? The next thing, within next 2 or 3 months, our inbound leads went from like 200, 250 a month to 40,000 a month, right? Brilliant strategy. Now we had to hire an inbound qualification team of 10 or 15 people to figure out how to make sense of these 40,000 leads, because a lot of them were junk and a few useful. By the way, this strategy may still work for many verticals. If you're looking for, capturing attention, this is great way, because as soon as we publish these pages, no matter what you search for, ZoomInfo showed up in the first page, right? And now back to, so 8 years later, we did something similar at Apollo. And here were the results. So ZoomInfo, same strategy, gave us like 40,000 new leads a month. At Apollo, it still worked pretty well. It was started with 4,000. It may have gone up to like 10,000 in several months down the line. Still captured early attention, but if you were doing it today in the same data space, I'd be surprised if you get even 400 or 500 new leads a month, right? So what was the best practice 10, 12 years ago? Because every single data company has published this same page. So Google's now they're competing against everyone's page and discounting and so on. So, but this is maybe a slightly technical example, but this is the same example works for all kind of best practice. Now, going back to the way ZoomInfo grew or captured early attention, which is really important for unicorn to be in making, is your buyers need to know that you exist and need to see you almost every single day before you become a unicorn. And ZoomInfo achieved that through programmatic SEO. Apollo maybe have programmatic SEO, but what they did is ZoomInfo had an enterprise business, but Apollo went after the low end of the market. So they coupled it with free data and PLG, and that provided probably arguably even more boost to the viral load than the SEO for Apollo. But if somebody was doing it today, you need a whole different strategy to work. All right, that was just takeaway 1. We got 8 more to go. If you're trying to build a unicorn or a big business, this is really important. I have run into so many founders that are simply not playing to win. I mean, this is a very personal and a harsh question to ask yourself. Are you really in it to like do whatever it takes? Because most don't. So I have run into 2 kinds of founders. Some that are very early in their career or very late in their career, right? The early ones haven't seen too many ventures, and late ones have seen a lot. I find both of them to be very successful. It's the ones in the middle that have seen a success or 2, they get strong confirmation bias, right? Or they've seen a buddy succeed. They want success, but only if it takes the exact same path they have seen before. They're not willing, and success is never a straight line. It takes surprisingly different paths, and the willingness to innovate and take risks is so key. If you think about, since we are talking about ZoomInfo and Apollo, at its start, ZoomInfo was run by Jonathan, where this was his 4th or 5th company, very experienced entrepreneur, right? And Henry, this ZoomInfo was his first. Henry runs ZoomInfo now, right? He acquired the company from Jonathan. This was his first company. Both brilliant in there, and then Apollo has a similar profile leadership team. A lot of these best practices that I shared with some of the other entrepreneurs didn't share that profile or conviction, and hence may not have benefited. But if you look at some of the characteristics of founders that are playing to win, you always got to be in offense rather than playing defense, right? So you can take a quick read. Accountability is important, and incredible ambition is important. Let me tell you a story. So Adam, I consider him as playing to win, right? So when you're running a company, you'll get all kinds of surprising, unexpected sort of curveballs thrown at you, and your job is to make the best of it, even turn it to your advantage. So here's a quick story. A few weeks ago, Adam calls me late evening around 8 p.m. my time and tells me, Santosh, we got sued by one of our competitors. And if you've been reading his LinkedIn, you probably know the details. And my first reaction was like, oh shit, but I saw he was gaining energy as he was describing. And then in the next half an hour, we convinced ourselves that this was the best thing And we could leverage that to capture more attention, right? Which is our goal at this stage at our B2B. And that, to me, is playing to win and not playing defense all the time. I think there is a certain very small group of founders and companies that are really committing and giving it all to be successful. Right? I hope you're doing well on time. So this is another mindset hack. Competing to really dominate, because we live in a strange market right now because of information symmetry. All the buyers are interconnected, right? So great ideas get oversubscribed and bad ideas get overpunished, right? So, world like this today, if you have to build a unicorn, you need to completely annihilate your competitor just to survive, because it's not going to be, the bell curve is dead, right? It's not going to be like 10 different companies all equally sharing market share. It's going to be like winner take all, one or two companies taking 80% of the market share and the rest fighting for crumbs. So look at this graph here. So this, most startups, they start with at the lower quadrant where they're trying to survive, right? And this is not a time to think about how you dominate the space. You need to cross this line of economic freedom in order to buy the rights to dominate, right? So if you find yourself at the bottom left, try to cross that. And the two ways you can cross, right? Either you become profitable, or if you're bootstrapped, or raise a shit ton of capital, right? If you can raise 50 million, 100 million, at that point, you don't care about revenues as much, right? Or you can, even if you're not profitable, you can dominate. But let's talk about the characteristics of companies at the top right? So there's less worry about day-to-day survival, right? There's a long-term purpose, and there's a lot of peace and strategic thinking once you get to the right. And by the way, you can do that at 5 million in revenue. You don't have to be 100 million in order to start to think about dominating your space, right? It's more of a mindset game than you can be very early and yet attempt to start to crush your competitors.
Can I
So
give an example, Santosh?
yeah.
So yeah, I think some of you know this. My company was spun out of an email newsletter app. I had a 3 million ARR app like MailChimp that I couldn't grow. And so tried a bunch of stuff. Retention.com was the result of that. The best example of this I've ever heard of in my life was the email marketing space. Constant Contact was the pioneer. They IPO'd in 2009 at 100 million of revenue. Then there were two companies called iContact and Vertical Response that were trying to do the exact same thing as Constant Contact with less resources. MailChimp at the time had 2 million ARR, and they did something that none of them could actually even match because of the places they were in their funding cycles. They had a free self-serve offer, which everyone said was stupid and cheap and whatever. And over the next 15 years, they became 12 times the size of Constant Contact. Literally, when they did that, when Constant Contact was 100 million ARR and they went free, they were 2 million ARR. And within 5 years, they were over 100. So that's an example of, it's a dominant pricing move, or it's a dominant go-to-market strategy that the incumbents just couldn't match. So I think part of this is just trying to do things that your competitors are unwilling or unable to actually do. And a lot of times it can be this like user acquisition, and then just being able to stay in the game long enough to let that be a truly dominant strategy. Back to you.
Thank you, Adam. So the next takeaway, best companies are always stacking S-curves to create competitive differentiation. So I like to say this: success is never a straight line, but it's most often denoted by a S-curve. So for this is something we often ask ourselves. So I look at, I think in terms of S-curves, even in my personal life. So if you find yourself putting in effort and getting no result, and you put in another double your effort and you still don't get any result, whether in your business or personal life, and then you see somebody across the office putting in 1/10 the effort and getting immediate result, the reason is that you haven't seen the 9/10 the effort they put in before. The way you get results in business or elsewhere is when you reach a tipping point, or your efforts accumulate, or your learnings accumulate, where you get all the results all at once. And this is the hyper growth phase of companies, right? And then once you reach the top end, even if you do the same initiative more, you're not going to get any more growth. You're tapped out for a variety of reasons. But if you don't do it, you start to decelerate, right? So that just becomes the new normal. And the way to keep growing is to keep stacking these S curves. So if you look at companies that have continuous or sustainable growth, it's a result of many strategies that were timed just perfectly, either implicitly or explicitly. So for instance, just very high level to explain this concept, I put this, say, ZoomInfo post-IPO, right? So they had gone into enterprise buyers, and they further penetrated into enterprise. And after a while, this wouldn't have given them continued growth, right? So what they did is acquired a bunch of companies, so they could sell more SKUs into the same 30,000 enterprise buyers they had. They were already selling into, right? So that bought them a few years of growth, but then that kind of started to peter out as well. And then you can see they're going after global data, and they're increasing their penetration into the enterprise buyers, and so on. So that, but for each of these S curves, there are probably 50 other kind of detail or lower level S curves or initiatives or that have to be timed as well. So I find it a bit of an art to kind of time these initiatives right. But as a leader, what you ought to do, I found it useful, is always have a big initiative queued up for the company, right? If you're trying, and if you have too many of these initiatives or too many of these S curves, it just becomes chaotic. But having none is also dangerous. Yeah, just pick one or two always. That's how you institute change in the company, even if you are doing well. All right, 3 more to go. So we do not live in the world anymore. Well, other than certain industries where you can patent and actually create a moat, but a lot of the software, that idea of sustainable economic moat is an old school thinking, right? If you have a 6-month moat because you created a feature that somebody else can replicate, that's okay. Take advantage of that short moat and create a growth spurt. So, for instance, there was a time when ZoomInfo's phone number was the best in the industry. I don't know if it still is, but that took them for a few years of growth. There's a time when Apollo's data was all free or close to free, and a lot of agencies were just reselling it, right? That was a bit of a moat for the time being. May not be true anymore, and so on. So these help you ride through these S curves, right? So recognizing these more, and they can come in the shape of low subscription cost or features or your go-to-market. All right. This is really important. If you're looking to disrupt your really large companies, this is a disruptive innovation model by Clay Christensen, right? So if you look at this graph, I snagged this picture from one of my LinkedIn posts. ZoomInfo did to DNB what Apollo is doing to ZoomInfo, what somebody new could do to Apollo. So let me break this down. So DNB was the ultimate data company, right? 200-year-old data company. When we were trying to grow ZoomInfo in 2012, 2013, we were going after SMB mid-market, right? DNB was selling data as $250,000 a year. And we innovated at ZoomInfo by selling it 3-seat license for $5,000 a year. That was a huge innovation. Now it may not seem, because everybody else does the same, but it was a bit of a risk that ZoomInfo was taking. There were many companies like Net Prospects, Avention, and a few others. None of them decided to build self-serve subscription tool at this low price. Apollo went after the low end of the market because by the time Apollo started to attack ZoomInfo, they had raised price to $30,000 a year, minimal, right? So what is important to keep in mind is when you fight for the least paying customers, companies don't want to, they rather abandon that fight and walk away than give you a good fight, right? So if you're a small company, fighting for the least paying customer is a great strategy to penetrate market with a slight change in form factor or slight change in so in the spirit of time, let's keep moving. If you are building a unicorn, it's really important to capture attention. And I find that most companies figure out either implicitly or explicitly, like I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, ZoomInfo figured it out very early in the game, how to keep showing on Google first page, no matter what you search for, which means they were generating probably millions, if not tens of millions of impressions a day organically just because of their programmatic SEO, right? And Apollo did the same, but in a slightly different way, where they had, well, now they probably have millions of users, a lot of them free. But if you think about it, every one of them count when they are posting something on LinkedIn, right? So Apollo has the user community of Apollo is far stronger than ZoomInfo's user community just by count, right? And that's a great strategy. So build your own intentional hype strategy, right? Or attention strategy to subsidize your marketing costs. Otherwise, you're just going to be paying a lot as you grow this business. So here's Adam posted this. So look at the post that he's been doing and the impression it captures, right? The first thing you notice is growth or impressions or signups these days happen in bursts, right? So bell curve is dead. There's no like guaranteed growth, even if so every growth comes from initiatives that you are or effort that you're putting in that day, right? So by the way, this is our marketing at our B2B. We are seeing 500,000 to 1 million impressions every week. And I want to share a story on how we did a product launch. So I have seen scores of product launch in my life and never as successful as our B2B. So it's only been 12 weeks since we launched our product. But in the first 2 months, we spoke to about 300 of decision makers in our ICP using LinkedIn posts. And the quick process was we get a lot of engagement. We have some automation set up in the backend to scrub engagers by the right ICP. And then we automatically send them a quick message saying, hey, do you want to chat? And get them on a calendar link and a Zoom call for like 15 minutes. And then we just don't sell. We just create credibility and then move on to the next one. It's incredible how powerful this is to subsidize your marketing costs and lead gen costs. So in just 12 weeks, we already have 7,000 accounts signed up. And our goal for 2024 is 12,000 and 2025 over 30,000 accounts. To give you a sense, ZoomInfo has 30,000 accounts. We are getting better at capturing attention. This is just the start. Once we have this machine humming, we can easily inject additional products through this distribution, and which is what we intend to do. But this is beginning to sound like the go-to-market for that is unicorn worthy. Customer subsidy. This 2 more takeaways. So it's really important to get more from your customers than just revenue, right? So customers should be subsidizing the future cost of customer acquisition. So if you spend X dollar into getting Y customers, then next year you should be spending only half of X, and the year after only 1/4 of X, right? So let me explain how this works for, say, a data business like Apollo ZoomInfo. So here's the flywheel. So as you get more data, it decreases your go-to-market costs. It makes the product better, and then you get more users or more customers, right? And with more customers, since they are also contributing data, and you have economies of scale, you get more data, and then it keeps getting better and better. So you're guaranteed that your business is more efficient, right? 2 years from now, 5 years from now, all you do is buy time. So think about a flywheel like this, and you go online and look. Every company has a flywheel that makes the business efficient, and you can build one for your business as well. Customers are not just for revenues. So think about LinkedIn, right? So LinkedIn, we are all contributing data or creating inventories for LinkedIn, and we are also paying 15 billion in revenues, and they sell us products that we are essentially helping build, right? That is just I'm giving a lot of examples of data companies, but the same can be done with non-data companies as well. So here are a few ways you can take advantage of, or you can ask your customers, right? Data contribution is one, but let's talk about co-creating business. Can they give us ideas? Can you get referrals that will subsidize your acquisition costs, reviews on G2 or UGC content, and help with the attention and hype and so on? So the goal is your business should always continuously get better and better. If every month it takes the same amount of effort to get the same revenue, then it's a difficult business, because trust me, it'll only get more difficult if you don't have a way to subsidize cost. All right, last takeaway: successful exec team is really the key to unlocking. So in my 25 years of career, I have to say that the exec team at Retention and RB2B is highly unusual, and I'm learning a few lessons. I'm finally understanding the value of having a tenure, right? And the reason is this team has worked together for over 10 years, and there's unbelievable trust, almost a family-like bond. There's a lot of accountability in the team, and yet people are totally willing to fail and not afraid to challenge each other. What I find interesting is there's a lot that changes in the business. If you can find an exec team that you're guaranteed to not get fired if you make mistakes, right? This is where people start thinking about the business when they're taking shower or going on long walks or their personal time, and great things happen. All right, here's a summary of what we discussed. Don't copy best practices. Try and innovate one for your own business. Play to win, not to lose. And try to dominate the space you are in. And it's easier than you think if you follow some of the frameworks. Keep thinking about your next S-curve. Change is a must if you want to grow. And recognize your micro moats, give value, bring it up, leverage. It's okay if it takes you only 4 months, 6 months of growth, because by that time you'll figure out a new moat. Your largest competitor always has a weak underbelly, especially at the low end of the. So if you want to compete, go after disruptive innovation at the low end, and then have an intentional plan for attention to discount your marketing and discount your sales, and work on your exec team. Now, one last slide. It's only been 12 weeks for us at RB2B, and we have 4 employees. Full-time working on this project. we have already accomplished over 20 million in impressions with over 7,000 account signups. Now, take a moment to consume those numbers and tell me if this is not a unicorn in making. But if we can do it with so little resource, each of you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh.
Let's go, Santosh. That was epic.
All right. So I'm going to ask the first question because there were two questions that I thought were really good that are very closely related that Rand Moore and Mike Migley asked. So Santosh, when you talk about dominating the market, what about the niche? There's a big difference in dominating space like email marketing versus dominating something like best demanded agency for fashion e-commerce brands in Italy. And then closely related, is this for SaaS tech orgs, or do you see the statement play to win and be so competitive where others are not prepared to go? Does that apply to service business models too? Right. So it's kind of like the question is it always appropriate to think in this way, or does this only apply to SaaS? Right. Like
that's a great question. I think it applies more to tech and SaaS, and because buyers are more interconnected when they are buying with all these tools like G2 and others have created a certain information symmetry. You want to create that like a snowball effect, right, and take advantage. I don't see the similar information symmetry around agencies, where if an agency appears to be growing or doing well, everybody starts working with the same agency, right? So may not be as applicable on the service business as it is for products and tech.
Okay, perfect. Okay, curious about your point of view of ecosystem piggybacking strategies for SaaS growth. So integration plus co-marketing inside of an ecosystem like HubSpot or Shopify versus being ecosystem agnostic. Do you have a view on this?
Well, totally. I think, especially when you're early stage and you're trying to grab as many eyeballs as you possibly can, why eliminate any? And ecosystems are, in fact, it gives you a tremendous boost, right? Because it's a captive audience. I would say do all, but certainly ecosystem, and it does help a lot.
Related question, any product-led partner strategies you've executed similar to your programmatic SEO strategy and seen success in your career?
Well, there are too many, but I'll limit. So when you are early and trying to grow faster than market would allow, you need some kind of reseller partnerships and agency partnerships, or I've seen Apollo do that a little bit better than ZoomInfo did. But yes, there are many. Ultimately, you need to think constantly about non-linear ways to grow business, right? Linear is going to be too slow. So non-linear could be, can others sell or help you with the growth, or can you get an unfair advantage like the programmatic SEO and so on. So yeah, let me pause there. Happy to take this. I have more thoughts, but if you want to, whoever asked this, send me a note and I can add some more later.
We got a good one that I think would be good for us to answer on LinkedIn just now. Banu Sharma says, "What do Adam and you disagree on when it comes to go to market?" That's a really good one.
It is. It is.
Yeah. So what comes to mind initially is when we were trying to, so Santosh joined us a year and a half ago when we were convinced retention.com was like a unicorn twice over. That didn't end up happening because, long story short, the churn problem that we thought we were going to solve didn't get solved for a lot of reasons. But that question that was just asked was something Santosh was like very focused on product type partnerships. And Diana and I were just like, we have never had one of these work for us. I don't know whether it was just the situation that we were in, like the type of product that we had and the incentive alignment between vendors. But Diane and I would just feel like Santosh was pushing us into these things that we knew were not going to work. Now that I'm in the middle of RB2B, like we have this lead gen agency opportunity where I see this perfect alignment between the tech vendor, who is us, and the agencies. And like, I just see it working so well. I mean, that's not like a product. It's agencies different than a product-led tech partnership. But that was the first thing that came to mind. Santosh definitely coached me into believing in a lot of this. Like watching MailChimp, I became obsessed with this freemium thing, but I think it took Santosh being a part of our team for me to have the sort of strength to want to actually, go for it and take the revenue deferral and deal with all of the problems related to free users that you have to do when you're executing something like that. What do you think, Santosh?
Yeah, let me answer that differently. You covered. I want to talk about what do you do when there's disagreements in exec teams, and it's really important to. It almost doesn't matter who is right. Success is a outcome of the cumulative conviction and lessons we learn as a team, right? So eventually you'll find as you keep working together, there's more and more synergies and a lot of the ideas start to converge. But if there are disagreement, it's like do a coin toss or talk each other out. And if you can't, then just give in, and you'll find a lot of those will start to converge over time.
Great. Can you explain extreme PLG? I think that was probably a big question mark for a lot of people that were listening to the presentation.
So PLG has some limitations as well, right? So by extreme PLG, I mean a little bit of what we have started to do at our B2B, where you are, with PLG, it's still the top of the funnel is not as I guess you need to bring traffic, convince them on your website, and then get them to sign and hopefully pay eventually. What we are doing with the LinkedIn-led growth is we are getting a lot more traffic. And now, in some ways, the product we have for our B2B is not as friendly for what we are delivering, because it's not a user-based product, right? It is more of a company-based, like you can only have one RB2B subscription for one account. But if we had a user-based product, our approach would be closer to an extreme PLG. I think users want to learn, like go beyond the product. They want to solve a real problem in their lives, right? And I think, just a lot more traffic, a lower hurdle to signing up, less focus on converting them into revenues is what I'd call it.
As an example, we had talked about, Santosh and I literally sat in a room and talked about what would kill Apollo at some point last year. And he's like, eventually someone's just going to have a free contact data database, like Google has a free database of websites. And that will be like, they'll charge for something else or something like that. As an example of like what an extreme form of PLG might be. So Santosh, somebody asked a question about net revenue retention. Liam did. So, and I know I've read a post of yours where you talk about when paying attention to revenue retention may not actually be appropriate. And that was actually his question. It's like, why do some people not focus on revenue retention? So in your experience, when does it make sense to pay attention to, and when could you maybe not have it be your whatever North Star metric?
Right. So around revenue, so here's I have some strong ideas around revenues in general, and then I'll come to revenue retention. Revenue is simply a friction to growth, right? So think about that from anytime you ask for money, you're decelerating growth. So in the beginning, when you're trying to grow, the more you can defer revenue, the more you can defer annual contracts, the more money you make in the long run, right? And I totally understand not everybody is in the space to do this, but in terms of retention, this is a complex topic. What you're offering has to provide the synergy for the buyers and like looking at the landscape and so on. But if you can defer all these churn discussions and revenue to later, when you already have 10,000 users using you, you'd find you can solve this problem so much more when you're operating with large numbers, rather than when there's a lot of urge to just get the business right for the first 100 customer or first 1,000. It's just far easier to solve these problems when you have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 users using it.
Thank you very much, sir. How about Nat? She has a question about the data space in particular. Santosh, where do you place Clearbit on the map in your Dun & Bradstreet, ZoomInfo, Apollo matrix? Clearbit was free PLG plus upmarket paid offerings. Would love your take on their journey and what you might have done differently, basically.
So Clearbit started off really well. In some ways, they innovated in directions others didn't. But they were almost too true to their founding principles of like using APIs. And they came late into building UI and prospecting tools and workflows and so on. And also, they never really invested in capturing attention the way other companies did. So those are the reason why I think it was a bit of a missed opportunity. They could have been a lot bigger and a lot better than others. They did do a few things right, but they were too focused on API first type product, which I think, like in the hindsight, if I were to recommend, I'd say they should jump into products and subscription product a little bit earlier.
All right. Thank you very much. Micah Friedman asks, Santosh, how do you define offense and defense?
How do I find, or
how do you define?
Define,
right?
yeah.
Like maybe examples of like what it means to be a startup who's playing defense and what it means to be. I mean, you told my story, but like didn't really.
Right. So let me try differently. So when you're a startup, you're starry-eyed about some billion-dollar company in your space, right? And you find yourself always copying what they do, right? And always, this is like more of a mindset where you always think they'll be ahead of you and they are so much better. Instead, I would encourage to change your mindset into trying to wreck their business, right? And it's not that difficult to to kind of reduce that gap over time, right? If with a different mindset. And the way this works is, instead of trying to find, a gap in their offering or trying to defend and say, yeah, they're better, but here's how we are just, your marketing, your sales, we live in a world where you grab attention when you are aggressive, when you have clarity of identity of who you are, and you communicate best. And if you're trying to hide behind defensive, I think approach, it's just going to slow you down. You have to take this on directly. If your objective is to compete with a large competitor, so if you look at, I mean, the examples I mentioned of both ZoomInfo and Apollo, they started off being very defensive, but then both became very offensive to compete with each other and D&B and so on. But that's the only way to kind of cut through the noise and generate attention.
One thing you've told me before, Santosh, is Apollo basically, before they did this business model innovation, they were basically trying to sell worse data than Zoom Info for half of the price, but doing basically the same thing.
Yeah, that's
It
what
was like a 30K ACV contract versus a 15K ACV contract. And then they started to take off when it was like data is $99, right? Like
right.
just radically different than like the incumbent is just like anything else. It's what's going to cut through. Okay. So Rand Moore has a follow-up. So if we're building a data platform to track business performance, there's some giants in the space, hundreds, if not thousands of competitors. Sure, a mindset be to dominate the market and be the biggest data platform out there, which is a very high aspiration, or niche down.
Niche
Did
down.
you understand that, first of all?
Yeah. So if you can find a vertical or a niche, this is a really big wave that's going to come in the data space, right? If you look at horizontal SaaS led to vertical SaaS, right? And all these Salesforce, instead of building the new Salesforce, people are building a Salesforce for legal professionals, right? So the same phenomena is going to play out. Vertical SaaS needs vertical data, which doesn't exist right now. There's some in e-com, but most verticals don't have their own Zoom infos of the world, and it's just a matter of time. So if you have the opportunity, go niche, and they're going to be big enough, like $1 billion businesses. May not be 10 billion, but there's a ton of opportunity in going niche right now.
I agree. Santosh and I talk about this all the time. It's like, we're kind of competing in a space where there's been a ton of bundling. So having a super simple free point solution is like cutting through like crazy. But if the point solutions were the market, then bundling would be very different, So yeah, there's a lot of sort of highly place and time dependent. My instinct is always try to be as different as possible. Okay, next question. I'm a marketing manager at Snovio, which is the same niche as Apollo RB2B Zoom Info. What do you think would be a great move to generate a lot of awareness? We do SEO, but as you said, it's decayed. We have a number of registrants monthly through SEO, but we're looking to scale awareness, basically. What would you do?
He's right. A lot of these strategies best practices have been tried, and they get decaying results. In the end, you want to solve people's problem, right? Take some good practices at RB2B, right? We're trying to create a community through content just like this, right? And a lot of the other contents. You would be surprised, even in this crowded market, if you can create a strong follower, strong community around data, they could just buy from you instead of others, right? It's commoditized anyways. So in a commoditized marketplace, create affinity, right? Create connections. And that's not something that's been done. The bigger the company, the less weak the relationships they have with their customers. So the weaker, you get the point.
Yep. No. Did you want to add something?
No, all good.
Okay. All right. We got another good question, man. Banu Sharma's asking some great ones over on LinkedIn. So if Adam wasn't so natural at it, would you still take a content-centric playbook for go-to-market? It's a really valid
Probably
question.
no, because like I said, every great question, by the way. Every business has a DNA, I call it organizational DNA, just like individual DNA. And all your strategies have to take advantage of this DNA, right? It's best to play to your strength rather than other people's weakness, right? And Adam is unbelievably good at this, and it does work for us. And this is where I say, just copying the best practice that's working for us may not work for you, because you got to play to your strengths.
Yeah. And I kind of only figured out that I was really good at this like 9 months ago.
And
which was very interesting. So
right.
You should try. And if you go back and look at my stuff 18 months ago, I honestly don't think you'd look at it and be like, this guy's supernatural at it. It was hundreds of hours and thousands of posts swinging and missing before I sort of figured out what, how to make something hit and like how to come across on this medium as what you define as natural. I'm
Yeah.
not kidding you. Look at my old LinkedIn stuff from like 12, 14 months ago. Natural is not what you might call it.
Here's a quick addition. If you think about ZoomInfo, their real strength is not data, it's go-to-market team and the sales team. They're hands down the best sales team I've ever worked with. They could be selling sugared water or furniture and still be the best at it. It's that good, right? But if you look at Apollo, their engineering and product team is unbelievable because they have built a platform that is comparable or starting to compare with ZoomInfo, but they didn't acquire any, right? They built it all in-house. Every company has to, even in the same space, has to pick a dominant strategy that plays on their strength.
Okay, next one. We got another good one for you, Santosh. From a career standpoint, do you recommend to stay in an industry or in the same lane for decades and decades, or jump around? That was from Meng Lee and LinkedIn.
That's such a great question. I tend to be intellectually curious and I learn a ton when I'm like moving around. In fact, the most I learn is in the first few months of a job. What I did for the last 15 years is while I moved around very frequently, I stayed in the same industry. So my relationships, my understanding of the industry just kept accumulating. Business is getting complex these days, and find something to stick around with. If you think your sales or marketing or whatever skills you have or domain, you can accumulate where you bring some of the learnings from the past and then maybe switch around. I'm a big believer of switching companies, but keeping industry or some market domain the same. That's how you create expertise.
How do you know when to switch industries?
Honestly, in the first year, I kind of get a sense of. So let me see the best way to respond to this. At this age, I kind of get a sense whether a company is going to, make it or not. Some of the best times I've had is when the best when companies are fast growing or trying hard to grow, the best of human potential shows up, right? I love being around in teams like that. So either it's not going to go that way, or it's too toxic, even if they are growing. Either way, I just keep moving. And few times I feel like the team is great and I love to stick around, which our B2B is one of them. So far.
Well, we are certainly happy about that. Okay, so we're going to take one more question, but before we take it, I'm going to just drop the registration link in the chat. Next week, I'm up again. I'm talking about this LinkedIn journey and like the whole thing of the first LinkedIn post I did and spent 2 hours on and no one engaged with it. And then my ghostwriter did one the next day that was a photos of a tweet and he spent 30 seconds on it and it got 3,000 likes. Starting from there, this breakthrough I had over Labor Day last year, everything about it, what I'm trying to do, why I think it's working, what the bet I'm making for 2024. So all about LinkedIn. If you're for whatever reason not registered, I dropped the registration link in the chat and on LinkedIn Live. I'd love to see you there. And I hope everybody, you can ask questions from Santosh next week too, if you think about any. Oh, here's a good one. Let's end it on this. In a cutthroat competitive market where everyone has the same moat, so no moat, is it a distribution war? Are underbellies are already consumed? So basically, long story short, And by the way, I believe this is the world that we're headed into. I think
Right.
that we're going to all have 500 more competitors than we
Right.
have now in like 3 years, just because how good the language models are getting and everything. So the question is this just a distribution war? What do you do to break through in this world of radically increased competition? Santosh, close this out with that one.
Capture attention. So you're right, Adam. This is if you have 20 competitors today, give it another 2 years and you'll have 200 competitors. The number of companies in every segment is only growing because the cost of software development is going down. With automation, it'll what took 6 months to develop will take 6 weeks, right? How do you differentiate? Figure out go to market. More ironically, the more affinity you have with your buyers, the more value you can give them along the way before they actually make a decision to buy is going to be your real moat. And in this day of automation, you'd be surprised how few companies are willing to put their name and face out there to create this relationship. So go-to-market mode is going to be the only and ultimate mode out there.
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do, I mean, Santos is making videos all the time. I'm making videos all the time. Our personal view is that this LinkedIn machine, the magic of it is you can scale human to human connection with it. And in a hyper commoditized world, a way to decommoditize is to create affinity and then sell things into that affinity, whatever you want to call it, brand, right? Like, great questions. Thank you so much, Santosh. Thank you everybody for showing up. We were above 200 at one point. And I hope to see everybody next week. I'm going to go run to my next call. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
I'll send out a recording later today.
Cheers.
Bye.